When Emma Pierce was found at the bottom of a ravine in 1988, the cops thought they had nothing. No witnesses, no weapon, no obvious suspect. Her case sat in a dusty box for 35 years, until a rookie detective opened it, pulled out one tiny plastic bag, and realized that the entire time, the killer had been sitting in there, on the end of a single, forgotten cigarette. Clearwater Ridge, Oregon. Back in the late 80s, it was the kind of town you only noticed when you needed gas between bigger places. A lumber mill, a high school, 2 churches, and one sheriff's office that doubled as animal control and lost and found. Emma Pierce grew up in the middle of all that. 17 years old. On a roll. Varsity soccer. Oldest of 3 kids and the only one who still wrote thank you cards after Christmas without being told. Her dad worked nights at the mill. Her mom baked pies for every fundraiser. She wasn't perfect. She argued with her parents. She wanted out of that town so badly it hurt. But she was good. And on October 15, 1988, Emma put on a blue dress, pinned on a corsage a boy barely had the guts to give her, and went to the Clearwater Ridge homecoming dance. She never made it home. By sunrise, a hunter would find her body in a ravine on the edge of Miller's Gorge. And for the next 3.5 decades, everyone in Clearwater Ridge would live with the same question. Quick question for you before we go back to that night. Do you believe small towns keep more secrets than big cities, or do we just notice them more? Drop your answer in the comments, because in this town, everybody thought they knew everybody. They were wrong. Homecoming 88 was supposed to be boring in the best way. Same decorations. Same teachers taking turns chaperoning. Same parents making the same jokes about not too much punch, okay? Emma arrived with her best friend, Casey. Their plan was simple. Dance until they forgot there was homework. Leave early. Go to an after party by the river. Be home before her dad's shift ended at 3 a.m. Nothing about that plan sounded dangerous. Between 9 and 10 p.m., multiple classmates saw Emma dancing, laughing, ducking outside to cool off, then coming back in. She wasn't drunk. She wasn't stumbling. She wasn't fighting with anyone. Around 11 p.m., Casey said Emma wanted to head towards the river party. They didn't have a car, so they were supposed to ride with a group of older kids. But when Casey ran back inside to grab her jacket, Emma was gone. She checked the bathrooms, checked the parking lot, checked with the DJ. No Emma. Back then, there were no smartphones. No constant location sharing. If you lost someone in a crowd, you just hoped you'd bump into them again. When Emma still wasn't home by 2:45 a.m., her dad started driving the route from the school to their house, headlights cutting through fog. He didn't find her. The hunter did, at 6:12 a.m. The sheriff's report described signs of struggle and a fall from the ravine edge. Her injuries were serious and fatal. We are not going into graphic detail here. What matters is that it wasn't an accident. And there were almost no clues. Almost. At the edge of the crime scene, just beyond Emma's shoe, one of the deputies picked up something small, something wrong. A cigarette butt. Crushed. Filter still slightly damp. Emma didn't smoke. They bagged it. Labeled it, item 12. And then, the 80s happened. No DNA testing the way we think about it now. No genetic genealogy. Just a tiny town, an overworked sheriff, and a list of suspects built out of rumors and gut feelings. Sheriff at the time was a man named Bill Hanley. He'd handled bar fights, stolen trucks, one armed robbery with a plastic gun, but never a teenage girl found dead in his woods. He did what he was trained to do. He cordoned off the ravine. He canvassed the school. He brought in every boy who danced with Emma that night. First on the list, her almost boyfriend, Jason Miller. Jason said he left after an argument with his own dad, who was drunk in the parking lot. Several witnesses confirmed it. His hands were scraped, but from punching his truck. His alibi checked out. Next up, the group headed to the river party. They claimed they never saw Emma outside the gym. They waited by their car for 15 minutes, then left without her. Then there were the usual suspects that show up in every small-town murder. The creepy older guy who hung around the high school. The loner kid with dark drawings in his notebook. the ex-con uncle who lived in a trailer off Route 9. All interviewed. All frustratingly clean. No scratches. No unexplained bruises. No conflicting timelines the sheriff could hammer on. The only things they did have were the ravine, the dress she wore, a partially obscured shoe print in the mud, and that cigarette butt. The lab in 1988 could tell them this. The cigarette was a filtered brand, popular at the time. It had lipstick traces on it, which confused everyone because Emma's lipstick didn't match. They checked with friends. Nobody remembered her sharing a cigarette with anyone. And that was it. No prints. No fibers that stood out. No blood that wasn't hers. The sheriff told Emma's parents, "We'll get whoever did this." He believed it when he said it. But as the weeks turned into months, then years, the leads dried up. Every time another case came in, the Pierce file slid a little further back on the shelf. By the time Sheriff Hanley retired, it was just another cardboard box in the evidence room. Dusty. Unopened. Except, not quite. There was one person who refused to let it go. My mother. If you're new here, I'm Detective Jordan Reyes with the Clearwater County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit. When my mom, Carol, worked here, she was a deputy and the closest thing we had to an evidence technician. She believed in labels, in sealed bags, in never, ever throwing anything away, just because. In 1988, she was the one who collected Emma's dress, her shoes, her hairbrush from her bedroom. She was also the one who sealed up item 12, the cigarette. Back then, she didn't know if it would ever matter. But she'd seen enough cases to know this. You don't get a second chance to collect evidence. You only get a second chance to look at it. When I was a kid, I wasn't supposed to know about active cases. But I knew about Emma. I would catch my mom staring at the same yellowed newspaper clipping, the one with Emma's school photo and the headline, "Teen found dead. Foul play suspected." Sometimes she'd say, "I just want one thing, Jordan. One thing that doesn't make sense. That's all it takes." I didn't understand what she meant at the time. I do now, because 35 years after Emma's death, my mom's hands can't hold evidence bags anymore. But I can. When I joined the department and a tiny cold case budget appeared, there was no question where I'd start. With the file that haunted my mother's career. The Pierce case. At first glance, it looked hopeless. The witnesses were older, moved away, or dead. The sheriff who'd led the original investigation had dementia. But the evidence was still there. A dress, shoes, photographs, and a tiny, crinkled bag with item 12. What nobody knew back in 1988 was that this cigarette had been stored just carefully enough to survive 3 decades. And science had finally caught up to my mother's obsession. This is the moment the story really begins. If you were me, opening this old box for the first time, what would you test first with modern technology? The dress, the shoes, the cigarette. Tell me what your first move would be, because the choice we made decided everything. We didn't have unlimited money. Far from it. DNA testing isn't free, and full genetic genealogy can cost more than most small departments want to admit. So we prioritized. The dress had already been handled too much. The shoes had been tried, tested, and retested in the 90s when DNA first hit the scene, with no foreign profile pulled. Item 12, though, no one had ever touched it again. No one had ever swabbed it. When I opened the bag, I half expected the filter to crumble. It didn't. It was dry, yellowed, but intact. We sent it to a private lab that specializes in degraded samples. They warned us there were no guarantees. That after 35 years, all we might get was noise. Then we waited. Weeks went by. Other cases screamed louder. Emma's box stayed on my shelf anyway. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, the lab called. They'd gotten a profile. Not partial. Not contaminated. A full male DNA profile. Not Emma's. Not a technician's. Whoever had smoked that cigarette had very likely been with her at that ravine. And we knew from her friends that Emma didn't smoke. If she had touched it at all, it was probably only to push it away. This was our one thing that didn't make sense. We uploaded the profile to CODIS, the National DNA Database. No hits. Nothing. Whoever he was, he had never been arrested for a qualifying offense. The old sheriff would have stopped there. I didn't. We got permission from the Pierce family to take the next step. Investigative genetic genealogy. That meant sending the profile to a different kind of database. One where people upload their DNA to find family, not to avoid prison. If we got lucky, we wouldn't find our killer. We'd find his cousins. And then we'd build a family tree backwards until someone on it had a reason to be in a dark ravine with Emma on homecoming night. We sent the file. We waited again. And in that waiting, the real twist was building quietly. Because when the genealogist finally called me back, she didn't say, "We found some distant relatives in another state." She said, "Detective, I think your guy has been here the whole time." Genetic genealogy isn't magic. It's messy. It's charts and probability and people's private family secrets spilled out in centimorgans. But in this case, our genealogist, Dr. Nia Clark, lucked out. Our unknown profile had a strong match with a woman in her 50s. First cousin level. She'd taken a consumer DNA test 3 years earlier to learn more about her heritage. She did not expect it to drag a killer out of the past. Through her, we mapped out a family line that had deep roots in Clearwater Ridge. The last name jumped out at me immediately. Leary. If you grew up in Clearwater, that name meant one thing: coach. Back in 1988, Coach Tom Leary was a local hero. He taught PE, ran health class, and coached boys basketball and girls soccer. Emma's soccer coach, Tom Leary. In the original investigation, Leary had been interviewed, but only as faculty. He'd helped with the search, held assemblies to talk about staying safe, stood beside the sheriff at community meetings, jaw clenched, eyes wet. He was never considered a suspect. Now, 35 years later, DNA said, someone in the Leary family had smoked that cigarette by Emma's body. The family tree narrowed it down to 3 brothers and 1 male cousin who were the right age in 1988. One brother had been in the military out of state that year. His records put him overseas on the date of the murder. The cousin had moved away in the 70s and never come back. That left 2 people. Tom Leary, the coach. His younger brother, Mark, who'd worked odd jobs and left town in the early 90s. We knew from school rosters that Mark never set foot on campus in any official capacity. Emma had never had him as a teacher or coach. Tom had seen her 3 times a week. Legally, we couldn't say the DNA belongs to Tom yet. But for the first time in 3.5 decades, Emma's file had a name attached to it. A name that had been right there in the original interviews. Smiling in team photos, shaking hands, signing yearbooks. Until that cigarette spoke up, he'd been invisible. Imagine this. You find out your high school coach, someone your parents trusted, is suddenly a suspect in a 35-year-old murder. Do you believe the DNA, or your memories of who you thought they were? Let me know, because that conflict, it nearly tore this town apart. Tracking down Tom Leary wasn't hard. After he retired from coaching, he'd moved 2 towns over. Bought a little house on a cul-de-sac. Taught part-time at a community college. No criminal record. Married once. Divorced. No kids. On paper, he was a boring man in his 60s. We decided to start quietly. We sent 2 detectives, myself and my partner, Diaz, to follow up on old school records. Basically, an informal chat. See how he reacted when we said her name. Tom answered the door with a limp and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He seemed nervous, but lots of people get nervous when cops show up. We told him we were revisiting unsolved cases from Clearwater Ridge. Asked him what he remembered about Emma. He said all the right things. She was a good kid. Real hustle on the field. Broke my heart. What happened to her? But his eyes never met mine when he said it. They flicked to my badge, to the notebook, to the photos on the wall. I asked a question he didn't expect. Did you smoke back then, coach? He blinked, then laughed. Sinners have it, he said. Quit years ago. We thanked him for his time and left without pushing. For now, we didn't need a confession. We needed his DNA. Legally. 1 week later, uniformed officers found an abandoned soda can in his curbside trash during a canvass for a completely unrelated community survey. Trash on the street has no expectation of privacy where we are. We collected it. The lab compared the saliva on the rim to the profile from item 12. It was a match. Not kind of close. Not, could be a cousin. A direct, exact match. The man who coached Emma, who comforted students at her memorial, who signed a card for her parents, had left his DNA at the edge of the ravine where her body was found. Now we could knock on his door again. This time, with a warrant. People think confessions happen like they do in movies. One big dramatic breakdown, tears, maybe a slammed table. Most of the time, it's quieter than that. We brought Tom in on a Friday morning. Mirandized him. Offered coffee. He declined. We started with softballs. His career. His memories of homecoming that year. We let him talk. Then we slid the photo across the table. Did you know she was found with a cigarette but near her shoe? I asked. He squinted. That rings a bell, he said slowly. Kids did all kinds of stupid things. Could have been anyone's. I placed another item on the table. The evidence photo of item 12. Then a current photo of the soda can we pulled from his trash. Tom, science has come a long way since 1988, I said. We know this is your DNA. His hand twitched. For the first time, he stopped looking like a confused old coach and started looking like what he was. A man suddenly realizing the past had caught up. He falls back on denial first. I was out there with the search party, he says. I probably just dropped it. I wanted to help. But we already know that's not true. The search parties never went near that specific spot until after the sheriff had already secured it. I show him the timeline. Explain how the first deputies on scene had to hike down carefully, how they wore gloves, how the perimeter was tight. His, I dropped it later, explanation doesn't fit. Then he tries distance. I smoked everywhere back then. Those things wind up all over. But this wasn't all over. This was within feet of Emma's body. We go another way. Did you ever give her rides? He says, no, never, that'd be against the rules. We show him a yearbook quote where Emma wrote, thanks for the rides home after practice, coach. His face falls. Line number 1. From there, it's like picking at a thread. He admits giving her rides. Then admits they sometimes talked about her wanting to leave town. Then admits he may have seen her that night outside the gym. Bit by bit, his story shifts. He just wanted to make sure she got home safe. Then later, he just wanted to talk to her in private. Then, even later, he lost his temper when she said something that hurt him. He still won't say the word. Won't say what he did. He just keeps saying, it was an accident. We know from the injuries it wasn't. But here's the thing. For the Pierce family, the exact words matter less than one fact. The man responsible is real. He has a name. He isn't some faceless monster in the woods. He's the coach who lit a cigarette at the edge of a ravine, thinking no one would ever know. He forgot that my mother was a bit of a hoarder, that she sealed everything. That one tiny, disgusting habit preserved a piece of him he couldn't take back. What do you think about this kind of case? Should decades-old killers get lighter sentences because they've lived a good life since? Or should the clock start when we finally learn the truth? Tell me in the comments. I read them, and so do a lot of people who've lived through cases like this. The trial didn't look like the 80s. No smoky courtrooms. No shouted objections. Just an old man in a suit. A jury born after the crime. And a story told mostly through charts, DNA reports, and a cigarette but projected onto a screen. The defense tried to argue contamination. That maybe the cigarette got into the evidence bag later. That maybe the chain of custody was flawed. My mother took the stand. Hands shaking, voice steady, she walked them through every evidence bag she'd sealed, every form she'd filled out that night in 1988. She cried once, when they showed Emma's photo. But when they showed item 12, she sat up straighter. That's my handwriting, she said. "I sealed that bag myself. I logged where I found it. Right by her shoe." It took the jury 8 hours. They found Tom Leary guilty of murder. The judge, weighing his age against the brutality of the crime, gave him a sentence that will almost certainly outlast him. For the Pierce family, there's no such thing as closure. Emma's mom still sets an extra plate at holidays. Her siblings still imagine what she would have been like at 40, at 50. But there is something else. Something quieter. Knowing that the man who killed her didn't get away with it. He just ran out of time. We closed the Pierce file last spring. I took the evidence box off the shelf for the last time. I didn't empty it, didn't burn it. I just relabeled it. From open, unsolved, to closed, conviction. Inside, item 12 still sits in its bag. A tiny monument to the fact that in real life, it doesn't take some giant fingerprint on a mirror or a dramatic confession to solve a case. Sometimes it just takes one clue. One thing that doesn't make sense. That someone like my mother refuses to throw away. So if you've ever wondered why detectives keep going back to the same old boxes, the same old photos, this is why. Because somewhere in all that dust, there might be one cigarette, one hair, one smudge, that's been waiting 35 years for someone to ask the right question. What would you do if the one clue that could change everything was sitting in a box no one had opened since before you were born? Do you think cases this old should still go to trial if we finally get a DNA match? Or should there be a time limit on justice? Let me know in the comments. If you think this is a good story, hit the like and subscribe button.